I started my career working in sawmills back in 2007. I was hired for a portable sawmill in southwest Washington state. This mill was located quite literally in the middle of the forest. It was constructed in the early 70s, and even in the short 30 years of its life, it seemed to have a decent amount of history inside of it. I worked the weekend graveyard shift, 2:30 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. the following day, on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. I was a trim drop operator. I had a partner who I worked with, and we were the only two in the area. His name is Pete. We would take turns rotating through the night. One of us would run the drop, where you would drop out bad boards, chunks of garbage, and just about anything else that couldn't be made into quality lumber. The boards that would be left to be processed would enter a lugged chain system and then be pulled through a scanner, and then a trim box that would cut the lumber to length and then take them to the next area, which was the sorter. The other one of us would sit at an operator's console about 20 feet away and watch monitors that displayed various parts of the machine and process flow. We rotate every few thousand boards to keep from becoming fatigued. One night, I was running the drop, and Pete was kicked back at the console station reading away at the newspaper. Everything was going just as normal as ever when I glanced over and noticed him peering up at the monitor for the outfeed with a puzzled look on his face. He jumped up and went walking down to the trimmer saw box and looked around it at the outfeed. Then he walked back, looking quite concerned, sat down, shrugged, and started reading again. This happened a second time, and by now it had my attention. I threw up the skids to stop the flow of lumber and walked over to him to ask him what was going on. There was a guy standing at the outfeed. I went down there to see what the hell was going on, and when I got over there, he was gone, he said with a confused look on his face. This didn't make any sense because this was an area that wasn't accessible unless you stopped the machine and activate a catwalk, which unfolds from the outfeed of the saw box to allow access to a small platform on the opposite side of the machine as we operate it from. I asked him to point out where this guy was hanging out. Pete pointed to the platform, slightly frustrated. I shook my head at him and laughed before running back to the drop to continue running lumber. Pete stayed fixed on the monitors now, newspaper folded up and thrown to the side. Not but 5 minutes go by before he jumps up and runs down to the sawbox outfeed again. This time I threw the skids up and followed him. By the time we got there, there was nothing. He pointed across the lumber table, which was 30 feet wide, to the platform across the machine and yells, "Who's over there? You aren't allowed to be over there, God damn it!" Both of us waited to see the man he had seen on the monitor, but once again, there was nothing. After a minute or so of looking on, we decided to move back to our stations. I walked by the console station, glancing at the monitor, seeing nothing, and Pete followed shortly behind. By the time I made it to the drop to start running again, Pete howled. I snapped around and saw him stabbing the monitor with his finger, yelling for me to come look. I ran over and looked into the monitor. Sure enough, there was a guy. He was standing on the small platform Pete had pointed out. The monitor is small, grainy, and black and white, but we're able to work out that this guy is wearing a tin hard hat, a very dirty and worn button-up long sleeve, with the sleeves either rolled up or ripped off, and very thick denim jeans of a dark color. He's just standing there, with his elbows on the handrail, looking on at the lumber from the sawbox. "Wait here," Pete yelled as he stealthily snuck down to the outfeed once again. As he closed in on the outfeed area to catch the guy red-handed for being in an area that you can't, or shouldn't, access while in operation, I looked back and forth at Pete and the monitor. About the time Pete made it to the sawbox, the man on the monitor looked up into the camera and literally just faded away, right in front of my eyes. I completely lost my shit. I felt a cold chill run down my back, accompanied by all the hairs on my arms standing up. I sprinted as quickly as I could to Pete, exclaiming, "That ain't a guy! It wasn't a fucking guy!" Pete just stood there, dumbfounded, both of us now looking on at the platform with our own eyes. "What should we do?" I asked, quite disturbed now. Pete crossed his arms in thought before deciding we should call our foreman down and tell him the story. We walked back to the operator station and Pete grabbed the mic of the radio and called for the foreman. We ran until he arrived, both of us ready to bolt for the sawbox in case we saw that entity again. The foreman showed up after about 5 minutes and we stopped running and explained what had happened. The foreman didn't look impressed, but he was smiling. He explained that we had just seen one of our old-timers. Back in the late 70s, we had a man who worked there, who ran the chip bin station, and one day arrogance got the better of him. Long story short, he got buried in a chip pile and was crushed and suffocated before help could dig him out. The foreman said he was one of the only people to ever work here and wear a tin hard hat, as an homage to his previous career as a logger in the woods. Other operators have had occurrences where they've witnessed this entity wandering around different machines, seeming to just watch the flow of lumber. My job on the trimmer continued on for some time after my first encounter with strange happenings in the mill. After about 3 months of running the trimmer, I was approached by my foreman with an opportunity to move to a different spot in the mill. He said that it entailed more money, and that was basically all I needed to hear. I moved downstairs into the basement cab, known creatively as the basement cab. This was perfect for me, I thought, because as much as I liked working with a partner, this was a one-man type of job. Once you got trained to do the job, you were left to your own devices, and that suited me fine. The basement cab was centralized in the center of the mill, on ground level. The mill was 2 stories, and the first floor is where all the waste conveyors that traveled all throughout the mill were located. If one of these conveyors plugged up for any reason, it was the basement guy's job to get it operational as quickly as possible. Aside from that, other duties were to wander around down there in the dark by yourself and look for anything that may cause a plug-up or a jam. The cab itself had dozens of monitors that overlooked quite a few different conveyors, but foot patrols were still necessary. The cab came complete with all the commodities required for sitting for literally hours and doing nothing, including a heater, an AC unit, a decent stereo, a microwave, and even hookups for a DVD player and the ability to switch input selections on one of the bigger and newer displays for the conveyor. The basement in general was hotter than hell during the day and cold as ice at night, and at times, irregardless of what time of year it was, the humidity had it so stuffy that you would think you could cut the air with a knife. The humidity also promoted a healthy supply of various types of wall mold. There were areas that were frequently flooded with a few inches of standing water, accompanied by the typical dank smell of rotting wood material. The areas that were lit were done so dimly that spiderwebs peppered all of the light fixtures, and each one cast an eerie, pale yellow glow in an attempt to eradicate the darkness. Lights would frequently burn out or flicker due to the vibrations and crashes from the mill up above, hammering away like there was no tomorrow. Having been put down there by myself after the first incident at the trimmers, I prepared as best as I could for any future encounters, but tried my best not to think of it while I was down there. Typical practice was to patrol with a flashlight due to it being so dark, and carrying a picaroon with you. A picaroon, for those that don't know, is basically an axe handle with a bludgeon, similar to a hammer, on one end of the head, and a point like a pickaxe on the other end of the head. This was for stabbing at and grabbing anything that needed to come out of a conveyor, if anything was discovered. And beside that, you generally feel more secure with something like this cradled on your shoulder. You also had a portable radio with you, as general practice was to carry one when you're by yourself. The basement could easily be a dangerous place. One night, just after lunch, I was headed from the parking lot back to the basement cab. I walked through a big set of double doors that are left cracked open wide enough for a person to slide through. I squeeze through the doors and pull my light from my vest and click it on, and begin my walk down a hall about 30 feet long and 10 feet wide. There's a door on the left that leads to a day shift maintenance shop that's closed up on weekends. The ground in this area is always covered in fine sawdust that constantly falls due to the machine on the floor overhead. Even after just sitting with coworkers and laughing, eating and smoking just a few minutes ago, once I walk into the basement, I feel the environment change. This particular time, it got heavy and crowded. I turned around, flashing the light at the doors I had come through, and shined the light from them to the ground and then up to my feet, noticing 2 sets of fresh footprints in the sawdust. Mine that go all the way to where I'm standing, and another set that just stopped 2 paces behind me. I hadn't been through there twice, and in any case, the sawdust erases new footprints within an hour, usually. I remember feeling my stomach instantly drop like a sack of potatoes. I charged down the hall and into the central basement and straight up a flight of stairs to the sawmill floor, where I then spent a lot of that night hanging out at different operator stations, reluctant to go downstairs for anything. This next one, I'm not sure if I can call it paranormal or not, but you can be the judge. Being especially bored on a lazy night, I venture up to the sawmill floor and make my way to the quad cab. The quad is a set of 4 gigantic band mills, about 20 feet tall, arranged in a way to cut slabs off logs. The quad operator is a man who went by the nickname Opie. He was an older guy, really gruff, and had absolutely no patience for anything or anyone at all. But he always had interesting tips and pointers to share with the younger generation. The conversation we had this time led to me mentioning feeling uneasy about the basement. I remember him looking at me with a sinister grin and spitting out, "Just bring that phone back there. Bring that damn thing over here," while pointing off behind me into the back of the room. In the corner was a stack of computer servers for the machine, and on a table next to the tower of computers was a pile of cups, gloves, hard hats, work tools, garbage, and months' worth of everything else that had just been casually thrown onto it. I moved a very dusty coat to the side and discovered a corded phone that looked like it had been torn from the wall and hurled into that corner. I picked it up, dusted it off, and brought it back to Opie. "The hell with that thing, man. The hell with it. Fuckers won't leave me alone. Watch this." He grabbed it from me and reached over his left shoulder, plugging it into a phone line after digging around at the mass of cords on the wall. He then sat it on his knee and said, "Now get ready, 'cause this is gonna be for you." Within a matter of seconds, the phone rang. It didn't even finish ringing once before Opie ripped the handset off the base and stuffed it in my face. I felt really uncomfortable. I put the handset to my ear and said, "Hello?" very cautiously. My eyes are locked with Opie's as I hear what sounds like somewhat distant, raspy breathing. Cupping the receiver to my head led me to further conclude that I was hearing breathing. I tried getting whoever was on the other end to identify themselves a few more times before Opie tugged at the cord. I handed it back to him, and he hung the phone up. Some 10 seconds later, the phone rang again. He then explained that the ringing got so bad that he just ripped it out of the wall, a real long ass time ago, like he said, and threw it into the corner. As long as that phone was plugged in, it was ringing. The phone is just wired to communicate with the foreman in his office, and on the weekends the foreman is never in his office, so that phone should not have been ringing. I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I feel like I've read part 1 of that before. I don't know if I just read it to myself and I thought that I recorded it, but I'm pretty sure I included that in a video before. But since the author came out with part 2, I decided to make a dedicated video to the story because I think it's really creepy. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I will be posting several more videos coming up that are more Reddit style videos, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you liked this video, feel free to like it. Be sure to go over to Reddit in the links below and give the author some love too. And yeah, subscribe if you haven't already and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. I will see you guys in the next one.